Well, welcome into Gear and Gaming, and today we're going to talk about the new Star Trek game, Star Trek Infinite, from a Star Trek fan's point of view. Is it a good game? Is it a good Star Trek game? Is it a good grand strategy game? Stick around and we'll find out. First off, we'll talk about what Star Trek Infinite is. It's a 4X grand strategy game that was developed by Nimble Giant and published by Paradox Entertainment. For players of the grand strategy genre, Paradox is a name you're going to know. And as you look into Star Trek Infinite itself, you will also notice that it has a lot of similarities to another Paradox title, which is Stellaris. And that's because it was built on the Stellaris engine that was given to Nimble Giant by Paradox Entertainment. Although as you get deeper into the game, you also notice that there is going to be some differences between Stellaris and Star Trek Infinite, so Star Trek Infinite isn't just a Stellaris Star Trek reskin, although on the surface it looks like that. As for the game itself, you can be one of 4 major factions. You can be the United Federation of Planets, you can be the Cardassian Union, the Klingon Empire, or the Romulan Star Empire. You start off in the Star Trek timeline right around the time of the Khitomer Massacre and the loss of the Enterprise C, and a general building of interstellar tensions between all the powers that moves forward into what we would recognize as the Star Trek Next Generation timeline, DS9, and so forth. So like I said, you can play as one of the 4 factions, but you will experience the same story, the same timeline as the 4 factions. You just get to see it from different points of view. Well, that's Infinite in a nutshell. Now, to answer the question is it a good Star Trek fans game? And in my opinion, yes. So as a Trek fan, one of the main things I noticed is that it feels like Star Trek. It looks like Star Trek. When Nimble Giant got a hold of the Stellaris UI, it went to great lengths to add in their own unique art and the unique feel of Star Trek, which I think they've done very successfully. They've made music and art and style that is uniquely Star Trek and will speak to you as a Star Trek fan. And that's everything, like I said, from the art to the ship models. And I mean, one of the last devlogs they came out with was them fixing just some minor things with the Cerritos to make it more canonical, which is not a major thing, and you could probably argue that they might be able to spend their time on doing something else, but it shows an attention to detail that I as a Trek fan and I as someone who picks up on those small little details appreciate. Now the second part of that is it a good strategy game? And in general, yes, I would say it is. But if you're used to Stellaris, you're going to notice that Star Trek Infinite isn't as deep as Stellaris is, and it isn't quite as free as Stellaris is. Stellaris is probably the penultimate, in my opinion, expression of a 4X game. You start from almost nothing, and you expand and combat and do all the things and conquer the galaxy. But in Infinite, you're stuck in a timeline. You're stuck in the Star Trek world. So they've had to adjust the grand strategy to that world. And I think they've done it very successfully. I think it works very well, but you have to understand that some of that freedom that you would get from a pure 4X game like Stellaris or Civilization is constrained by the fact that they have to keep it somewhat canonical and somewhat inside the Star Trek timeline. So in this case, I would say it's almost more like Hoi 4. You know, if you've ever played Hearts of Iron 4, you're stuck inside the World War II timeline. So certain things are going to happen regardless of what you do as a player. So if you think about it that way, I think it makes a lot more sense in the grand strategy genre. And I think they've pulled it off very well. I think they've made a story that flows, something that can keep your interest. And with the addition of the mission trees, like in Hoi 4, it gives you the ability to wiggle through that timeline a little bit differently if you want to. But it still keeps you on that track because it has to, because it's built within a historical context instead of just a free-form 4X game. So the bottom line for fans of grand strategy is there are better grand strategy games out there because there are grand strategy games that aren't constrained by living in the Star Trek universe. But if you are a fan of Star Trek and you want to play a grand strategy game inside of the Star Trek universe, I think they've done that incredibly successfully. So now that we've talked about the canon and how well the game works itself, let's talk a bit about is it worth it? The game, as of now, about 2 months after release, is on sale for $29.99 US. And I would say it's incredibly worth it. I have about 30 to 40 hours into it now, and I haven't completed a whole playthrough of any one faction yet. So that's pretty good for me. Now, granted, I'm being more story based. I'm working on it as enjoying the story. I'm reading all the things as they come up, and I'm trying to, make decisions on whether or not I want to do something based on my faction and not just min-maxing the playthrough. So I think there's a lot there. So you have 4 factions. You have basically a normal timeline and an alternate timeline that you can go down in your mission trees. And between all that, you get 8 playthroughs, which I'm guessing if you play like me is going to take you 100 hours. But even cut that in half, even if you can play all 8 in 50 hours, 50 hours for $30 isn't bad. So that's my bottom line here is I think it's worth it. I think if you are a Trek fan and you are a Trek fan who enjoys playing grand strategy kind of games, this game is going to hold your interest and it's going to be fun. It can be fun just playing around in the universe itself, playing around in the story that you know already. And it can be fun forging those different paths, going down the alternate paths of expansionism as the UFP or, playing the spies as Romulans. It has a lot of possibilities there. So, in the end, like I said, if you are a fan of grand strategy and you are a fan of Star Trek, I would recommend this game. Now, beyond that recommendation, I have another kind of reason for wanting to have this game is because Paradox Entertainment's the one who put it out. They're the publisher of this game, while Nimble Giant is the developer. Paradox is the publisher, and Paradox is known for its DLC. So I would not be shocked and amazed that if this is holding strong for us to see different playable factions come out like they have in games like Hoi 4, where you can play minor powers instead of just the major powers. Or they add to those mission trees, they add to the tech trees that you can fall down, and you get more and more in depth and more kind of outro ways of affecting the universe. How that and Paramount get along, I don't know. That might be a sticking point for Paradox. Paramount doesn't want a game messing with canon too much. Or it's just a game. I mean, Star Trek Online has done many different things and messed with a lot of Star Trek canon over its years. So I wouldn't be surprised if Star Trek is able to do that in Infinite as well. And with Paradox's record of supporting games over the long term and adding DLC to them as you go, I feel like there's a lot more growth and a lot more area in this universe that can be explored. And I think Paradox, if they think the money in the market is there, will take advantage of that. So that's it. You like grand strategy, you like Star Trek, and you got $30 to spend, I think this is a good place to spend it. And if you liked this video, I'd appreciate it if you head on down there, hit that like and subscribe button, help us grow the channel, help us out with the algorithm. We'll see you again here next time on Gear and Gaming.